Under the dim glow of the night lights, Nurse Lizzy glided into J ward with an elegance that was anything but ordinary. Her hips swayed and danced in a hypnotic rhythm, her lipstick red and luscious, while her nurse uniform hugged her curves like it was designed just for her. Each twist and roll of her hips was a spell, each step a silent invitation. The men watched, their mouths wide open, completely mesmerized. Their ailment was forgotten as Nurse Lizzy twirled and twerked with a grace that was as captivating as it was scandalous. Sit back, relax, and subscribe to enjoy this unforgettable, beautiful, seductive night nurse story. In the capital city Abuja sits an orthopedic hospital renowned for the brilliance of its surgeons. But unknown to many, a particular ward in the hospital, J ward, had a nocturnal activity that made many male patients there to wish that they would never recover. Nurse Lizzy, as she's lovingly called, reigns supreme at night. By day, Elizabeth is but a name on a duty roster. But by night, she transforms into something almost mythical, a vision of beauty, mystery, and to the men in Ward J, undeniable seduction. Nurse Lizzy was no ordinary nurse. Standing tall and proud, her ebony skin glowed even in the dim lights, accentuated by the thick sweeps of simmering powder on her cheeks. Her full lips were painted a scandalous red, the color as bold as her nightly secret activity. She wore her hair in a long flowing waves that cascaded over her shoulder like a waterfall, and her feminine figure displayed beautifully in her uniform. Every night, the male patients in J ward lay restless in their beds as they wait for the clock to strike 11 p.m. You see, Nurse Lizzy has these night dance performances she does, and it was enchanting and mesmerizing, whatever she moves that beautiful body of hers. "Good evening, gentlemen," she would say, flashing a knowing smile. The men respond eagerly like morons. "Good evening, Nurse Lizzy." "Oh, Nurse Lizzy," cried Uchenna, a patient who had been healing from a sprained wrist for months. "My bones, they are aching again. Please, could you massage me a bit?" Another patient, Bode, clutched his thigh in a dramatic fashion. Despite his once broken bone being perfectly healed, he said, "Nurse Lizzy, your beauty is the balm for my pain," he sighed. "Please, can you apply this balm on my thigh?" Nurse Lizzy chuckled and said, "You know what to do, boys." Uchenna and Bode brought out wads of cash, and Nurse Lizzy attended to them while other men in the ward watched and wished they had money to pay for her special services. Later that night, she placed a small speaker on the nightstand and pressed play. Afrobeat music filled the air as she began to sway her hips. The men's eyes widened, each holding his breath as she moved with a slow, graceful twist, each step an unspoken invitation. Her hands traced her curves with a teasing grace, fingers skimming over the fabric of her snug uniform. Bode swallowed hard, nudging Uchenna. "See how she moves. If only I had just more nights here, but the stupid doctors want to discharge me." Uchenna grinned and replied, "For her, I will break my other wrist. Bode, don't tempt me," and they both laughed. As the song deepened, so did her movements, shifting from soft sways to deliberate dips, her hips roaring with the rhythm that made hearts race. And just as the men thought they couldn't handle anymore, she stopped, gazing at them with raised brows, and said, "My sweet gentlemen, if you want more dance, you know what to do." Groans and desperate laughs echoed through the ward as the men fumbled for their wallets. Some patted their empty pockets, others quickly checked their phones to see if their wives had transferred their upkeep money yet. Because everyone knew the rules: no payment, no show. One patient accidentally spilled his cup of water over himself. Waving desperately, she walked towards him, towel in her hand, and she said, "You know the deal," she whispered to the patient, leaning in close, her perfume filling the air. 20K for me to clean that water on your body, or I call the 60-year-old auxiliary nurse, Nurse Rebecca. The patient quickly transferred money to Nurse Lizzy's account, and when the other men at the ward watched the sexy way she cleaned the water from his body, they all started to splash water on themselves and paying her 20k each just to clean the water off their body. Nurse Lizzy was making cool cash every night. Most of the men in J ward were good to go home, but they kept lying to the doctor just so they could spend more nights with Nurse Lizzy, because they all knew that as long as there was a Nurse Lizzy and her sensual night dance, there would always be a reason to stay just one more night. As the sun rose, the hospital corridors buzzed with the usual morning rush, but in Ward J, the men lay in various states of anticipation, their minds spinning with thoughts of Nurse Lizzy's performance the night before. Among them, Bode was especially quiet. Though it wasn't Nurse Lizzy on his mind, it was money. He pulled his phone close, fingers hesitating over the screen. Meanwhile, Mrs. Joy, Bode's wife, was at home, redialing a list of relatives and friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Her face was filled with worry, exhaustion clear in her eyes as she finally got through to her cousin, Emeka. Emeka, it's me, Joy. Please, I need a favor from you. Bode, my husband, he's still in the hospital, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Ah, Joy again, Emeka groaned. My dear cousin Joy, since Bode had that accident, it's like he's drinking your bank account dry. Please, Emeka, just one last time. He says the doctors are demanding more for a special treatment. Please, I just want him to be okay, Joy said to Emeka. Emeka sighed and replied, Fine, I'll send you 500k, but after this, no more. Your husband Bode has really spent so much at that hospital. Joy's face brightened slightly, though guilt gnawed at her as she muttered her things and disconnected. She glanced at the 2 children she has with Bode. Then she dialed Bode's number. Bode in Ward J picked the call. Bode, I just borrowed 500k from Emeka, my cousin, she announced, her voice troubled. Only 500k? Bode's tone was dripping with disappointment. Woman, you know my legs need extra care. Joy replied, Bode, I am trying my best. Emeka said it is the last time. Bode clicked his tongue, annoyed. Well, what can I do? The doctor said if I don't get the premium treatment, my leg might never heal properly. Just as he finished the call, Uchenna, who was shamelessly eavesdropping from the next bed, chuckled, nudging him, and said, Bode, I swear if your wife knew the premium treatment you were paying for, she would break that leg all over again. Bode laughed, giving him a wink. Ah, but that's why women are better off left in the dark. Across town, a young lady named Munachi was having a conversation of her own. Standing outside her rented apartment, a look of worry on her pretty face. Munachi's mother, Mama Muna, stood beside her daughter with her arms folded, shaking her head in disapproval. And she said, Munachi, why do you keep doing this to yourself? She scolded. Every day, you are running around for Uchenna, gathering food and money to help him in the hospital. And for what? Munachi replied her mom, Mama, he needs me. I can't just leave him there. Her voice soft, trying to convince herself that once Uchenna leaves the hospital, he was going to marry her like he promised. Mama Muna sighed and said, I don't trust that boy, Uchenna. I don't think he's the man for you. Munachi protested and said, he's a good man, Mama. He had an accident and broke his wrist. He needs my support. Mama Muna huffed and said, well, do as you please, but you have borrowed too much money for a man that is not even yet married to you. Back in the hospital, the men at J Ward were eagerly waiting for midnight for Nurse Lizzy to show up again. Uchenna had gotten 20k from Munachi, his girlfriend, as he wants to pay for the special cleaning service when he accidentally spills water on his body. That night, as Nurse Lizzy walked in, Uchenna quickly spills water on his body, and Nurse Lizzy walks over seductively and slowly wipes his body, while Uchenna groaned like a goat. Then suddenly, he heard a big shout. "Uchenna, what is going on here?" Munachi was right there at the ward, her heart pounding as she saw Uchenna enjoying Nurse Lizzy's sultry touch. Uchenna was shocked and he stammered, Munachi, what are you doing here by this time?" With a heavy heart, Munachi stepped into the room, her voice quivering. "Uchenna, I thought you needed me. I bribed the security men so I can spend the night with you. I did not know this was what you do here every night. I regret the day I met you." Uchenna, still stammering, said, "Muna, you don't understand. Nurse Lizzy's special touch helps me to recover." Munachi blinked, trying to hold back tears, and said, "I have given up everything for you, Uchenna. I have emptied my bank accounts, borrowed from everyone I know, just so you could get well, and this is how you repay me. God will judge you, Uchenna." And she ran out of the ward, crying. The entire ward fell silent as Nurse Lizzy, with her luscious lips curled in a bemused smile, unperturbed by the mild drama, and she asked, "So boys, are we having our party or what?" "We are having a party," they all shouted and threw cash towards her as she twerked and danced and entertained the men in J Ward. The fluorescent hospital lights cast a dim glow as Bode checked his watch for the fourth time that night. He shifted impatiently on his hospital bed, glancing down the hallway, waiting for a glimpse of Nurse Lizzy. Tonight, he had gone all out, paid for the VIP experience. Nurse Lizzy was known to give extra attention to a particular private room that was close to the ward. Whenever she enters that room, she would spend long hours there. The boys in Ward J were rumoring that if you pay for a VIP private hospital room, Nurse Lizzy would give you a very special treatment that would blow your mind. For this, Bode made his wife, Mrs. Joy, to borrow more money, lying to her that he is paying for a special premium surgery. Now he has paid for the private room, and hours passed, no Nurse Lizzy in sight. Bode paced up and down his private VIP room, his anxiety growing by the minute. Finally, he stormed to the ward and asked the boys in Ward J if Nurse Lizzy showed up tonight, and they replied, no one has seen her. By morning, a head nurse, Mrs. Williams, entered Bode's VIP room to check on him. "Excuse me, ma'am, where is Nurse Lizzy? She promised me a special checkup last night, but I did not see her. Is she off duty or something?" The head nurse snorted. "Oh, Nurse Lizzy, she's unavailable. You will understand soon," she said, glancing at Bode with a slight disgust. Around afternoon time, Bode left his private room to go and bid his friend Uchenna goodbye, because Uchenna has been discharged due to the fact that he no longer had money, since his girlfriend, Munachi, who is paying for the hospital bill, has dumped him. As Bode entered J Ward, he heard the men there talking animatedly, and Uchenna standing with his arms crossed as he talked with the other patients. Bode went to Uchenna and asked, "Oh boy, wetin dey happen? Why is everyone looking shocked?" Uchenna replied, "Nurse Lizzy has resigned." "What?" shouted Bode. "Resign, ke? After I've spent thousands to pay for a private room." Uchenna replied, "This is bigger than a private room matter. Nurse Lizzy is actually a Mrs. She's married. In fact, that particular private room she always visits and spends long hours inside is actually occupied by her husband." "Wow! Uche, are you sure of what you are saying?" Bode asked, looking drained with shock. Uchenna replied, "The head nurse, Mrs. Williams, is the one that broke the news to us. Nurse Lizzy is Mrs. Elizabeth Coker, and she is married to Mr. Adam Coker, her husband. Mr. Adam was involved in a car accident 3 years ago and had a spinal cord injury. The surgery would require millions of naira, and Nurse Lizzy did not have the money. So she connived with other nurses in the ward so that they can allow her perform her night dances and raise money for her husband's surgery. When they finally raised the money, the surgery was performed and she resigned and traveled out of the country with her husband. Just as Bode was trying to process all the shocking news Uchenna was dishing out, his wife, Mrs. Joy, stormed into the ward. Her eyes blazed as she marched straight to Bode, her voice trembling with anger. "Bode, I have been through humiliation, borrowing from everyone in this town just to keep you in this hospital. I thought I was saving my husband." She placed her hands on her hips, face flushed with fury, and she continued, her voice very loud. "But now I learned that you have been throwing my hard-borrowed money at some nurse for your premium surgery." Bode opened his mouth to respond and said, But my dear Joy." She quickly cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Oh, my name is Joy, but ever since I married you, it feels more like sadness. And you know what? I don't want to be sadness anymore." She turned, raising her chin high. "I am leaving you, Bode, and all those money I borrowed for your stupid premium services, you must go and hustle and pay them back." With that, she strode out of Ward J, leaving the patients and nurses in stunned silence. As Joy's footstep echoed down the hallway, a nurse giggled, whispering to her colleague, "The poor woman deserves a medal. If she knew the truth earlier, maybe she would have saved herself the trouble." The patients in J ward were embarrassed, and they shifted uncomfortably in their beds. They realized that everyone, the nurses, doctors, and even the cleaning staff, had known about Nurse Lizzy's true purpose all along. Uchenna lowered his head, guilt and shame mixing with heartbreak. He had lost Munachi, a woman who had stood by him through everything, sacrificing her dignity, her savings, and for what? For a fantasy he had conjured about a woman he barely knew. In the quiet that followed, Uchenna mumbled almost to himself, "I should have been loyal to someone real, someone who loved me." Bode, on the other part, sighed, staring at the empty doorway where his wife, Mrs. Joy, had last stood, and he said with bitterness and regret, "Sometimes we only learn when it's too late." As the hospital settled into its usual rhythm, the head nurse, Mrs. Williams, shook her head, smiling slightly as she murmured and said, "True love isn't about flashy promises or fantasies. It's about sacrifice. And sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones we take for granted."